Hello everyone and welcome to this Your Overseas Home webinar. My name is Rosie, I'm the Senior Copywriter here at Your Overseas Home. Today we'll be chatting with Fabien Pelissier from Fab Insurance about the residency and visa options for home buyers in France. It's great to see so many of you with us today, whether you are watching live or on demand. Before we start, Fabien, please can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about what Fab Insurance does?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for the introduction, Rosie. Well, hi everyone. So I'm Fabien. I'm the founder and managing director of Fab French Insurance and Fab Expat Services. So, well, it's very simple. Since 2015, we've helped English-speaking expats move or relocate to France, and hopefully that's what we'll keep on doing for the years to come. Especially since we need you today. I mean, France is a bit gloomy at the minute, so we need your sunshine.
Yeah, we've definitely got some of that today. You can see my forehead is shining.
Good.
Okay, cool. So at the end of this webinar, we will open the floor up to questions. If you do have any as we go along, please type your questions into the tab. It's just on the right-hand side of your screen. We do hope to answer as many questions as we can today, but if we don't get round to them all, don't worry, we'll send any unanswered questions over to Fabien and the team at Fab Insurance. Today we will be talking about residency in France for home buyers. So it'd be great to hear what options are you considering? Are you buying a holiday home, a second home, or a permanent move? So if you let us know in the comments, we can kind of tailor this to you. I'll hand over to Fabien and I'll let you know what comes in.
Okay. So, well, as you can see, it's probably the slide is giving away what we'll be talking about initially. So staying beyond 90 days in France. So actually in this case, you'd have two different options, because some of you might be holiday home buyers or owners. Some of you may want to permanently relocate in that property, or in a property in France. So what are the options to extend the stay for 90 days, whatever as an intended tax resident in France or not? So first, the allowance you have, maybe important to state that, you have a 90 days allowance every 180 day, okay? There is, if you just type 90, 180 Schengen area, in Google that, you'll find tons of calculators online who can help you, do the math to see, to calculate the allowance. But that's the legal allowance. You don't need a visa to do that, for most countries at least. And that's the by default rule. If you want to go exceed that allowance, well, there is just but one choice, which is apply for a visa. So there are tons of different types of visas. The two main options that you may want to consider are, first, a 6-month visa, or second, a 1-year visa. Well, why not do two times 6 months? Because the 6-month visa is not a renewable one, whereas the 12-month, there are some 12-month visas which are renewable. And also the 6-month visa is not very flexible. It's like 6 months in a row. Like if you get one started 1st of January, for example, it will expire on the 1st of July. And there's no way you can be like 6 months per annum in France, unfortunately. So this one is convenient if you have like a fixed window you want to move to France. But if you want to have a broader window or broader options, then you need the 12-month visa. You can combine the 90 days allowance with a 6-month visa, but you should be very mindful of the way you do it. Because if you use the 90 days allowance and then a 6-month visa, this is okay. But if you do a 6-month visa and think that when the visa expires, you can then go back to the 90 days allowance, unfortunately, this is not how it goes. When the 6-month visa expires, or a 1-year visa for that matter, when it expires, you'll have to leave a 90 days buffer. So leave the Schengen area for at least 90 days until you'd have built up an allowance again. So so you can combine the two, but just there's a particular order. It's like 90 days allowance and then 6-month visa. That you can do, not the other way around. Or the 1 year, as I was saying, or the 1 year visa, where so the 1 year visa, there is just 1 year period and then it expires, or there are renewables, options that are renewable, depending on if you want to keep on renewing those on a yearly basis. Very important, I didn't mention that, a visa needs to be done in either the country of residency or one of your countries of nationality if you have multiple nationalities. So it cannot be done from France, okay? It has to be done from abroad. And not any country abroad. It has to be a country where you are a legal resident or one of your country where you have a passport, basically. So, and back to the options, then you'd have tons of different types of 1 year visas. You'd have visas that enable you to be working, non-working. We can be a bit more specific with that, but very often, especially if you're looking into going into your second home, you probably don't want to be working, or if working, that would be remote working. Note that the non-working visas in France are compatible with remote worker. Basically, France doesn't consider remote worker to be working, at least not in France. This is considering you're not working for a French company or for French clients, but most of the time this is not the case. So that's why I've made this assumption. So that's the basic layout. I think, Rosie, did I cover it or the most of it?
No, yeah, that's good. That's definitely a good outline of the 90-day rule. One question that catches me up, and I talk about it all the time, is so the 90-day rule. So it applies to non-EU residents, so third-party nationals. Sorry, I'm tripping over my words today. Does that include other Schengen countries? So can I spend, 20 days in Spain and then spend 90 days in France, or is it purely France?
Yeah. So yeah, you're right. You're right. You asked the questions. That's actually a very good one. So the first, indeed, if you have, I don't know, like an Irish passport, then that rule doesn't apply. Okay, even if you're British resident, British national, but you also have an Irish passport, then you can just go to France and then be there pretty much as long as you'd like. There are some tax implications, but let's not mention, let's not go that deep. So yeah, it's only for third-party nationals that you were saying, and also non-EU nationals. Okay. Secondly, in regard to the Schengen area, you're also correct. So unfortunately, the example you took is not possible. It's not 90 days in France. It's 90 days total in the Schengen area. They're actually upgrading, airports and, like all these electronic gates and stuff. So that, because for now it's basically, either a stamp in your passport or some biometric gates will record your passage into the gate, and then, they can double check how much time you've spent. But by 2025, it should all be automated, or most of it. The ETIAS, they're working on like some European standard norm, and they'll know how much time you've spent in the Schengen zone. And if you've exceeded that, first you hope for a fine, but also if you want to consider visa applications in the future, it might jeopardize those applications or make them more complex. So you don't want to be exceeding that, especially considering that visas aren't that difficult to secure most of the time. Well, obviously, there's some paperwork involved, but try to stick to the rules and it should be fine.
Yeah. Oh, it's good to know that will make it a little bit easier to track, because I know at the moment it's a little bit, you have to kind of...
Online calculators, but yeah, let's be honest, they're not very convenient. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And let's say I do spend 90 days in 180 in France. Once that's over, can it start again from that 181st day? Can I spend 90?
And the logic is very simple. Basically, if you've been out of the Schengen area for 90 days in a row, it's certain that you've built up the allowance again. Because actually, the allowance is on a rolling period. So as long as you've been out of the Schengen zone for 90 days, then we could say, well, from the day after, so from the 91st day onwards, then you've built up a 90 days allowance again. Because every day that comes, then you would have built up another day allowance. So whatever you've done in the past, as long again as you have that 90 days window, you know that you've built up the allowance again.
Okay, Fab, thank you. I always say Fab, don't I? I'm going to be repeating it, but it's all just Fab.
Fab is cool, and hopefully it's fabulous. And hopefully it will be fabulous.
Yeah. It's on brand, so we'll go with that. We have had a question from Lisa. She's read that they're going to scrap the 90-day rule possibly in 2025. Is that correct?
So Lisa, sorry, I was trying to, us male doing two things at the same time. Sorry, I was trying to find a question. Can you repeat it? I didn't hear it.
She read that they're going to scrap the 90-day rule in 2025. Is this correct?
No. Again, what they're doing is you'll have this automated regulation where basically these are like electronic visas or automatic visas through the ETIAS and other norms like this. But no. The rule should keep on going. It's just that it might actually be either more simple in some situations where it's all tracked automatically, or on the other hand, you may have to apply for kind of small visas or like easy types of visas. Yeah.
Okay. And it's sort of like a passport system, isn't it? ETIAS.
That's it. Yeah.
I think, so basically it's meant to make it easier for you tracking your 90 days. So it's good.
Calling them like short visas, but it's like a passport. It's like very tied to the part.
Yeah. Okay. And is it possible to own a holiday home in France without having a visa?
Yeah, well, a lot of people actually, or property owners in France, even post-Brexit, and wherever you're from, well, you see, we have people buying from Qatar, but obviously the UK, US, any country, you don't need a visa, you don't need a residency permit, you don't even need a French bank account for that matter. You will need to pay French property taxes, though. Well, actually, the exact equivalent of what you have in the UK, like the council tax or property tax. But even if you don't have a French bank account, but you're able to transfer money onto a French bank account, then you'll be able to pay that tax. So no, you don't need anything. Basically, France is happy to if you invest into France, France will be happy with you doing that. It's just that if you want to spend, again, back to the 90 days rule, if you want to spend a bit of time in France and exceed the 90 days allowance, then at this stage you may want to consider other options. But apart from that, you're good to go.
Okay, cool. And when do you need a long-term visa? Is it immediately if you want to stay longer than 90 days?
Okay, so we've touched base on the topic a bit earlier in the conversation. So the vast majority of people, so obviously, well, first, let's state the obvious. If you want to move to France to become a permanent resident or a taxpayer in France, well, then obviously, then you'll need a long stay visa. So what's something called the VLSTS. This one's obvious. Otherwise, for second-home owners, who needs a visa, and especially who needs a one-year visa? Well, usually people who want to have flexibility, they want to be in and out of France as often as they want. They don't want to be able to have to look at dates or calendars and, just be able to enjoy France. So, and also people who think they may exceed the 90 days allowance. So for those guys, then there's the question of whatever we consider a 6-month or a 12-month, but I'm considering the worst case scenario, like the hardest to secure, which would be the 1-year renewable visa. Then, well, you need to consider this, or when's a good time to apply for the visa, let's say, as long as you can come up with a date, like I want to start a visa for 1 year on the 1st of September, and then I'll try to renew that every year. The application itself is at a minimum of a 1 month process, so you should be at least 1 month away from that intended arrival date. The ideal application window, I would say, is 60 to 90 days away from the date, or the date. But also, you may want to consider your options, well, visa options, because there are a lot of different options. So for 6-month visa, it's a bit more simple because it's a shorter time frame. It's kind of a one-off, like 6 months in a row. Whereas for renewable visa, as you could potentially renew those and be in France like for quite a bit, they have a more, let's say, comprehensive set of rules that you should follow. At the end of the day, because I think the goal is not to bother you with too much details, the top sellers, I would say, although it's not something that really sell, but the top sellers when it comes to visas is either the visitor visa, which, unlike the name suggests, could be a permanent visa. But the visitor visa is basically the non-working visa. So small JIT owners, remote workers, non-workers period, retirees or early retirees, qualifies for all of those people. Or working visas. Very often, it's probably going to be a business visa for English-speaking expats because they're either invoicing their employer or they have a business of their own, they're self-employed or things like that. These are the main categories. But within the category, within the visa itself, whatever the type of visa you're applying for, it boils down to 3 main pillars all the time. And if you meet those pillars, you're almost certain that you should qualify for the visa. And what are those pillars? So I'll name them and then I'll detail them quickly. It's proof of income, proof of address, proof of medical coverage. So the proof of income. Well, you need to be able to show that you're making enough for your stay in France to be sustainable. So if you don't intend to live in France, it's just a second home, well, just show them a copy of your pay slips or bank accounts or bank details, bank statements, so that they can see the past 3 bank statements and say, okay, well, you're getting paid 2,000-3,000 a month. Okay, that's good, you qualify. What they want to see is that you're making the equivalent of France minimum wage or more. And at the minute, it's roughly 1,400 euros net a month per person, although they kind of apply a discount for a couple, but yeah, it's like more like 2,000 euros for a couple. But that's basically what they want to see. Or even if you have 0 income, you just times 12 the amount I've mentioned. Again, I run up the numbers, roughly, so 18,000 as a single person, and as a couple, 24,000. If you have that amount in savings, then you can have 0 income. That's completely fine. And they'll say, okay, you have enough savings to support your application. Well, times 12 if it's a 1-year visa, times 6 if it's a 6-month visa. But yeah, you get the point. So that's how you can self-assess, if you'll meet the proof of income bit. The proof of address, you will need a safe place to live in France. So if it's a 1-year visa, they're very strict about that. You need to have a long-term accommodation. So, well, if you're a second home owner, it's perfect. You have the address you bought in France, you can use this one. If not, well, you can have a long-term contract in France. If you apply for a 1-year contract, you need to have a 1-year visa, you need to have a 1-year contract. Or you can be hosted by friends and family. But this one, sometimes doesn't work. It depends. Like you need to have like a solid file so that they're confident your application is credible. But I mean, these options would qualify. For a 6-month visa, they're a bit more flexible, but the general idea is the same. They want to make sure you have a 6-month accommodation. You've anticipated on this and you have a place to live for that 6 months. As we are focused today on second homeowners, basically you can use your address, the address of your property that you may have bought in France or you had in France, and then that would qualify. And then the final bit, the proof of medical coverage. Well, for Europeans, this is settled. They just don't need it. That's very simple. Or when this is the spouse of a EU citizen, they may piggyback, that. So there are exemptions to the rules I'll disclose, but basically for most of the time, you're looking for private medical insurance. And so the difference here, private medical insurance is you need a 12-month policy if it's for the 1-year visa, and you need a 6-month policy for a 6-month visa. Well, you're probably thinking like, yeah, well, the 6-month and 12-month policy are the same, aren't I? I'm just paying for 6 months or I'm paying for 12 months. Well, yes and no. The thing is, if you go with a 12-month visa, they expect you to be covered for 12 months, even if you just intend to be 3 or 4 months in France. So it's not something you can switch on and off. Like, you need to show them you have a 12-month coverage. And they have kind of a strict set of requirements. Like, they expect you to, 30,000 euros worth of medical coverage, in and outpatient benefit, repatriation should be covered. They don't want to see any kind of medical exclusions on the policy, and most importantly, they don't want the policy to have any sort of excess or deductible, kind of a strict set of requirements. But obviously, I tell you, we have policies that we've battle tested, 100% money back guarantee. Just come to us, we'll guide you through this. But that's basically the third pillar, means most of the time private medical insurance.
Okay, thank you. And on those three, that criteria, does that apply to all? Yes. Did you say pillars?
Pillars, yeah.
Pillars, okay. Do they apply to all visa applications for non-EU residents?
Pretty much, yeah. Again, then we'll adjust the pillars depending on the exact type of visa there. For example, the business visa, well, the proof of income could be substituted by with a business plan. Although you can also use a business plan and support the business plan with savings as well. You can very often combine things. But it always boils down to the three pillars. You need to have an address, you need to have income, and you need to have medical coverage for the duration of your visa.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
It's actually very simple.
Yeah. We've got quite a few people who are looking to retire to France.
Okay.
And I know we are focusing a little bit more on holiday home buyers today, but could you give a little insight into that process?
Yeah, sure. Well, actually, as I was mentioning, the visitor visa, which is a non-working visa, very, very often is the go-to for retirees. So you can use this one, like it's a 1-year visa, and also there's a misconception because I've spoken about renewing visas, and a lot of people come to me like, okay, I'll get my 1-year visa and then I'll renew my visa. If you retire to France, you probably don't want to be renewing visas. It would be kind of a different process. Then you probably are looking for a 1-year visa that you'll then convert into a residency permit, which we call the carte de séjour in French, to ultimately get the carte de résident, which is a multi-use permit. And the only gray at the end of the whole process, usually, which is a 10 years process, carte de résident permanent, which is the 10 years, it's like a passport, the 10 years residency permit. So so retirees have a slightly different process. It's just probably have to deal with the visa just once, and then they'll apply for a residency permit. And also, second homeowners will not be applying for French national health care, whereas retirees probably will be applying, will have to be part of the French system. And depending on their age, they may even be granted access 100% for free. And they may even skip the insurance bit if they have state pension. So through a process called the S1 process. So a lot of exemptions and stuff, but again, three pillars always apply. So sometimes you can, there are exemptions or things that you can substitute to do the pillars. And And retirees are like kind of the textbook type of people who apply for visas, who have it the easiest outside, because it's the most straightforward process. It's just about checking boxes, which the French would love that, like checking boxes on forms. And so that's why and that's also the type of visa and the kind of people who have the highest, by far and large, the highest acceptance rate on visas.
Okay, cool.
Which is good news.
And just to confirm, you're able to help with the ticking of boxes and making sure that all of that is in line.
Well, the visa itself and the insurance bit, yeah, both of them, yeah.
Lovely. Okay, and did you want to share a few additional tips for holiday home buyers? So I do know a few people might want to rent it out when they're not there. Is there taxes they should consider, that kind of thing?
Yeah, sure. Well, it's a solid list. I think we should go through the list. So the buying process in France is so buying a property is a very secure process. You're going through a guy called the notaire, and the guy is kind of an agent of the site, although it's technically he's a private contractor, but is working on behalf of the site to collect the fees mostly, but also would be the guy writing the contracts. There's no way to bypass this guy. He's the only guy accredited to hand over the legal documents who would prove that you are the owner of the property. He's also the only guy that can escrow the funds. So making the whole thing super secure, because you cannot be scammed. If there is anything wrong in the process, the notary will just cancel the process. So in terms of delays, on average, you're looking at a 90 days process, basically plus or minus a couple of weeks. So 2.5, 2 months and a half to 3.5 months. But that's, it's pretty much a process, and vast majority will have a 90 days process. There is something that's worth mentioning, because buying a vehicle for second home owners, so it's completely doable. A lot of people are doing that. There is something a lot of people don't think about, is in regard to their driver licenses. If you have a non-EU license, and unless you have a British license, because one of the post-Brexit agreements says that you British, if you have a license from the UK that you got prior to Brexit, pre-Brexit, it is valid pretty much forever in France. So that is good. But for people who've had the license post-Brexit in the UK, or anyone else that has a non-EU driver license, then beware of buying a vehicle in France and not being a French resident, because that would be much harder than you think. So obviously, this is what we do all day long. So we have solutions, but it very often implies you actually don't buy the vehicle, and you set up a business who is like a non-profit, basically, who would be a shell company to be buying or holding that vehicle for you. But therefore, this business becomes kind of a legal permanent resident in France, and would allow you to have a vehicle or vehicles in France without you having to convert your license or have you pass the test in France. Because otherwise, that's pretty much the only options you have. Like, you'll have to have a French license eventually if you have a non-EU license and want to have a vehicle in France. So this one is very often overlooked. I'm mostly referring to, Canadians, Americans, Australians, South Africans, all those guys. Beware of that. So obviously we can help, as I was saying, but it's much more complex than you think it is. So at the end of the day, it's not more expensive, don't get me wrong, but it's just that if you don't think about that beforehand, you have very unpleasant surprises. Property taxes. So you've mentioned about income also from properties. So you'll have to pay taxes, property tax in France. Also, the rule of thumb is pretty much the same all across the globe. Any bit of income, so the property will always be taxed based on the rules of the country it's in, and same for the revenue it may generate. So if you were doing some Airbnb or holiday lets with your property when you're not there, then you'll have to declare those revenues in France. You'll also have to declare those revenues in your country of origin. That's part of a household income. But, well, fear not, you will not be taxed twice because, well, France has agreements with all of the English-speaking countries I'm aware of, US, Canada, UK, again, South Africa, New Zealand, Australia, so no worries, but you'll have to declare those. And so it might imply that you'll have to pay taxes on those in France. Same goes for inheritance and wills. Like a lot of people buy a second home in France and think, yeah, well, I've done a will in the UK or the US, and then, well, I'm good to go. Yeah, well, no. If you don't do anything, if you don't hire, and it's actually also the notaire who does will in France. So if you don't hire a notaire to do your will in France and get like a French specific one, then your French property will just follow French inheritance rules. And very often, like if you're not married with your partner, or you want to favor some of your kids or whatever, same, you're up for a nasty surprise, or actually, well, they'll be up for a nasty surprise. So you may want to consider this. Again, it's not very expensive, but this is very important to be aware of. And we have English speaking, well, solicitors and kind of notaires who can help you with that. So just get in touch. This is something we do pro bono. I'll just share with you some details and can get in touch to get it done. The last bit, mortgages. This one at the minute is a sensitive topic. Well, I'll be a bit blunt on this one. Unless you're considering a massive purchase and a very big mortgage, like something like 300,000 mortgage would be seen as a cheap one. So I'd rather aim at 400,000 to 500,000 at the very least. Unless you're looking at that kind of figures or more, at the minute it's highly unlikely that you'll be able to secure a mortgage. They, as an expat, like, well, even as a French native, it's a bit complex at the minute. But as an expat, like even worse. So if you're looking at a small mortgage, just drop the idea, at least until you become a French resident. So you can start with rental accommodation. A lot of expats do, so it's not a problem. Then once you've been around for a while, basically the rule of thumb here, it's like once you file your taxes in France, then it becomes much more easier for you to go to banks and try to secure mortgages. So don't get me wrong, I'm not saying this is impossible, just saying, and I'm seeing so many rejected, like almost 100% for small mortgages, like 250 or less. Then this should not be something you consider unless you're looking at bigger properties or bigger mortgages, and then you'd have more options. But yeah. So hopefully that covers it all. I don't know. How are we looking, Rosie?
It's looking good, thank you. Sorry, I'm massively replying at the same time to people.
Much better than I am at multitasking, that I can say.
I know, honestly. Okay, so yes, we have had a lot of questions. I've got quite a few people asking to talk to you directly about their requirements, which is great. You can scan the QR code just on the screen now. If you just go onto the camera on your phone and tap onto it, it will take you to Fabien's calendar, so you can book in with him. You can obviously talk about your requirements in detail, which is a little bit more personal to your circumstances, which is really good.
And I think we'll be sending a follow-up email as well, so that you'll have like direct details, the same link in a non-QR format.
If you don't want the QR code, we'll send you his email later. That's absolutely fine as well. Okay, we've got a lot of questions, so let me just scroll back down to the bottom.
Okay. I'll be having a sip then to get ready.
Go for it. Okay. I have an Irish and Swiss passport. How long can I stay in France?
Forever. Irish passport will prevail.
Love it. I'm actually thinking of getting an Irish passport, but I think the process is quite long. But that's one for another time. Okay, we've done that one. This is an interesting one. I've not heard this one before. Alan is and coming to the end of his Article 50 residency permit, which I think was something granted pre-Brexit, which lasted 10 years. What would happen in that instance? Can you apply for another visa?
So it's a residency permit, so it's a carte de séjour. What was the name? Sorry, Alan?
Alan, yeah.
Alan, yeah. Well, Alan, as you've been in France for a while, apparently, you know that the French will like to confuse you as much as we can, especially in terms of paperwork. So, it was too simple. So we've kept the same things, but changed names, because otherwise, you may get a grip of it. So that wouldn't be funny. So, but joke aside, you just renew that. So you go at the prefecture and you ask for that residency permit to be renewed. Which it will, because again, that's one of the post-Brexit agreements as well. They should renew it for a 10 years permit, but now it's no longer a carte de séjour. They should provide you with a carte de résident permanent, which is a 10 years permit. So basically, to keep it simple, you should get the exact same document you have, which is, well, I don't have it with me, but it's like a plastic card, same as a driver license card. And you should have this document again, because probably the one you have, the 10 years one, but you need to renew it, and you need to do it at least 2 months before your current one expires. So if it's soon to be expiring, then you should get in touch with the prefecture quickly and get it renewed before it expires. Because if you let it to expire, then you become like an illegal migrant. So make sure you just renew it, but you'll be good to go. Yeah, they'll renew it.
Okay, thanks. And Richard has asked, you mentioned there was a type of non-working visa that allows for remote work. Is there a time limit of how many months you can work remotely for a foreign company before your tax?
None. Well, so in terms of visas, no, there's no restrictions, no limit. There are some things to consider though, and mostly they all have something to do with taxes. So if you spend and work in France, well, remotely, but from France, for 183 days or more per fiscal or tax year, which is from the 1st of January to the 31st of December, if you spend 183 days in France or more, then you become tax liable in France. So you'll need to declare all of that income in France and might be subject to some French taxes. And also, then if you become tax liable, you also, or probably then, well, it really depends on, but most of the time it means that you can also enter French national health care, but also that might imply that you may have to pay for a special tax for remote workers and some retirees that we call the CSM tax. It's basically the tax that you're paying to get French social security. So if you're British, when comes the time for retirement age, well, state pension, 66, 67, you can trigger a process, even if you're in France already, called the S1 to void that tax. If you're non-British, you may have to pay the tax forever, but there is a bit of an allowance. Like it's at the minute, it's roughly 23,000 euros every bit of income per person. Every bit of income under that amount is not taxable. Every bit of income over this amount is usually taxable at a 6.5% rate. It's only if you become a resident or a tax resident in France. And it's also, you get something in return. You get French national health care in return. So, but no limits as to how much time you spend in France as a remote worker.
Oh, thank you. Ken is asking, he's a remote worker. He aims to spend 179 days or less in France. His wife and daughter may wish to stay longer, therefore getting a renewable annual visa for them. My wife does not work and daughter is a student. Is this possible? So he won't be a resident.
Yeah, everything's possible. I've mentioned the tax. The tax doesn't apply for minors, so daughter should be exempt as well from this. But well, again, Depends also if they're married or civil union and stuff like that. Oh, by the way, I didn't say that, but if you married a civil union, make sure you also get the equivalent done in France, so that then it's recognized by France. Otherwise, they don't recognize it, or you may get in trouble. So you want to do that or get that done. But let's consider they're married. They're married. All of the requirements I've mentioned, we're talking about household income. So if he's a remote worker and the wife comes to France with the daughter, and let's say is making enough to compensate for the three of them, which again should be roughly 2,500 euros a month. If you're making this much, even if the wife's not working, obviously the kid's not working, then he qualifies for them three. Well, the two of them, but potentially including him. But if he doesn't want to become a tax resident or doesn't spend 183 days or more, then they'll become tax resident, but not him. So it is doable. There's a lot of things to consider in a scenario like this, but like the short answer is yes, that's completely doable. And the wife and daughter can enter the French system, probably going to be through a visitor visa for them. And yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you. That's a good question from Marina here. Do you think that the elections will change or maybe tighten residency laws?
It's a bit of a political question, so it's always a bit tricky to answer that. The short answer is, well, it's a personal opinion, obviously. Well, as I have lived in France for a while now. France is also a very democratic country. Like you can tell. I mean, the minute the French aren't happy with something, they think something is too extreme or goes against their interests. You can see we riot in the streets, or like we're on strikes. You've probably seen this picture of people, having the apéro, the glass of wine, and the streets were literally burning in the background. So it says a lot about like this is kind of normal in France. All that to say that I don't expect anything to change, whatever the outcome of the elections. Well, first for that main reason that, well, even if it goes to the extremes and even if they want to do things that are not good, well, the French would protest against that and nothing would happen. But also because if we look at the past and what has been done so far, if anything, France has shown that, at least for the Brits and Americans, they've tried to ease immigration processes, not make them more complex. And then we've seen, like even earlier this year, unfortunately, it's often being rejected because they see that as being discriminatory, because basically why the Brits or why the Americans? So, but it shows that France is looking for ways to make it actually easier for you. So again, considering English-speaking migrants or second-home buyers, I don't expect anything to change. And if anything, I actually expect things to be easier or better. Again, considering our demographics, kind of audience we're talking to. So I would say I'm cautiously optimistic, and I know that the French will still have the apéro no matter what. So very good.
Okay, that's a good answer. Thank you. And this is a question that Diana's asked, which I think will help everybody. So you said that it was, by the way, I've just realized it was pillars you were saying. I thought you were saying peelers, like oranges, but
no. Oh, pardon my accent. Yeah, Jack, no.
Don't worry, Graham came in with that. Thanks, Graham. Yes, Diana's asking, obviously, one of the pillars is you need to prove that you've got somewhere to stay. So she's asked, should we buy a property before applying for a visa to be able to use that address, or should we apply for the visa first?
Yeah.
You still there?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, sorry. Don't know what happened. Sorry.
So her question was, should we buy a property before applying for a visa to use the address, or visa first?
Yeah, it's a very common question and issue. Is like kind of a catch-22 situation. Seems like a catch-22 situation. So, yeah, you need an address, indeed. When people are buying, very often they want to use the address of that property they're buying. to support the visa application. So again, I won't be going into the specifics of the buying process, but it's only at the very end of the process that the notaire will give you something that is called the acte de vente authentique, which makes more sense in English, which is the proof of ownership. Mm-hmm. And it's only with that document, actually, it's only that document that you can use as part of a visa application process to support your visa, considering you're using a property purchase to support your stay, okay? If it's a rental, obviously it's a different document. So what if I want to move beforehand? Like I've put down an offer and I'd like to move tomorrow, or like as quickly as I can. Well, in that case, unfortunately, then you'll have to wait until the whole process has gone through. We have a trick to, and actually one we pull very often, which works and is legal. Basically, you ask the seller to actually write a rental accommodation, a rental contract to you or with you. And they'll be happy to do it because it shows the ultimate commitment from the buyer. And therefore, you can use this to support your stay. And then it's just that this rental will become ownership like in a couple of months. And then it's good. But to answer the question more directly, again, when you bought a property in France, well, you can know in advance, you can self-assess your application. Proof of address, proof of income, proof of medical insurance. Insurance, I mean, I won't even talk about that. It's just you buy a policy. So it's super easy to secure. Address, you're buying one. So same. I mean, so it just boils down to the address, to the income, sorry. If you have the income and or savings, you know you'll qualify eventually or anyway. So there's no way to say if you buy a property, you sit and you'll get a visa. But if you meet the 3 pillars, well, you'll have the visa. So I know it might look a bit scary because you're like, well, what if I buy the property and I don't get the visa? But, and again, that's what I'm saying. We do more than 1,000 visas each year, each single year. I've never, ever seen someone buy a property in France who had his visa rejected or denied. If anything, I've seen a couple, don't know what to call them. I wouldn't say rejections. Like I've seen a couple where, you know, some documentation was missing as part of and then the consulate asked them to provide the missing bits, but that was it. And when I'm saying this, it's actually a fun story because I've seen some guy had a second home in France and filed an application at the consulate because as part of the application, you need to provide them with 2 ID pictures and you provide them with pictures of himself, like selfie pictures of himself on the beach. Mm-hmm. So the guys at the consulate were like, well, mate, this is not really an official document. So can you please provide us with our IDs? So that's pretty much it. So just to say, worst case scenario, you've provided them with non-compliant documentation. But apart from fun anecdotes like these ones, and again, it didn't end up in a rejection. They just asked the guy to fix his application. So
sort of queried. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
lovely.
Then, if you just remember anything, no selfie of yourself on the beach for official documents.
Down. Okay, wonderful. Thank you. That is about all we've got time for today. Hundreds of questions are coming in. If we haven't got around to answering your question, they will be forwarded to Fabien and his team, who will be able to get back in touch with you. Alternatively, you can scan the QR code or the email that we'll be sending you tomorrow with the recording of this webinar, and we'll have his email in as well. So thank you so much, Fabien, for all your insightful tips and advice. We do strongly recommend that you all get in touch with Fab Insurance directly to discuss your requirements in detail. Before we finish, I would like to invite you to leave us a review on Trustpilot if you have found this webinar remotely helpful. And yeah, that's about it. Thanks again. Happy property hunting. Lovely to see you again, Fabien.
Thanks, Rosie. Thanks for having me. Thanks, everyone, for watching. And looking forward to reading through your questions. We'll do our best to answer them all, and we'll send you a follow-up email so that you can book a consultation, ask them over email directly. We'll answer your all.
Okay, Fab. Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye. Cheers.